Next, we have some more fun news. The Community Center Site Plan Study, and City Manager Erik Tungate will introduce the speaker.
Robert Stampian is here from Plant Moran to go through our presentation. Today's presentation, as Robert's going to detail here in a moment, is a huge step, though, because this is just where on our campus do these buildings best serve our community. That's the answer that we most wanted. I mean, he's going to be sharing some more details in terms of recommendations for square footage and estimated costs based on real-time market numbers. And I see he's got it going here,
Right.
so I'm going to turn it over to him.
All right, thank you. All right, just a little bit of background of Plant Moran Real Point. We're the real estate division of Plant Moran. You probably know Plant Moran for tax and audit services, but what Plant Moran did is we...
Robert, I think you have to speak into the mic just a little bit
sorry.
closer.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. We have a real estate division of Plant Moran, and there's about 130 of us. We provide real estate capital improvement expertise to our clients with owner rep services. There's a lot of our clients that aren't used to doing large capital improvement projects, and we have in-house expertise from architects, CMs, or construction managers, accountants, attorneys that help develop these projects. My background is in architecture, although I have an extensive knowledge of construction management. I worked for Barton Mallow for 15 years. My father's an architect. He just retired 6 months ago. He's 94. So I'm sure he's done work in Oak Park as well. But you know, I love architecture. I love these type of projects. I've been involved with 4 or 5 community centers in the past, I would say 4 to 5 years, which seems to be a trend with a lot of municipalities because of the fact that they've received ARPA dollars that they could use to spend on these initiatives. And this is just an example of some of the public sector clients that we work with. We also work with Oak Park Public Schools across the street here. Actually, I'm going to be working with Angel, the superintendent, on the renovation of the natatorium project across the street, which will start in the spring. And just to give you some examples of some of the projects that we've worked on in the past. Farmington Hills, the Hawk, as you know, was a high school in Farmington Hills that was sold to the city and converted into a community center. This is actually one of the sites that we visited with our team, just to take a look at their program spaces, to see the size of the spaces, what works, what doesn't work, and perhaps you know, look at maybe a program that would fit for Oak Park through that experience. This was a $27 million renovation project, and keep in mind this services about 82,000 residents in Farmington Hills. Of course, your resident population is a lot less than that, but it did have a rec pool component that was very interesting to see that portion of that building and how it operated. We also are building, or just completed, Van Buren Township Rec Center. That's about a $16 million project, 36,000 square feet of area, and the population there is about 24,000 residents. Redford Township, which is under construction right now, is another one of our projects. It's a $21.5 million project funded by ARPA, HUD Dollars General Fund. There's a whole mix of different funding sources for that particular project. That services about 46,000, I think it's 46,000 residents in that area. And then just to round it off, Waterford Township, they're going out for a bond in November. They're potentially taking over a portion of the OCC campus in Waterford, approximately 56 acres. Along with 2 buildings. One's a student center that they'll convert to a community center, and an existing gymnasium building. We're also building right now a natatorium project or a pool project in Caledonia. This is going to be operated by the YMCA. That's under construction right now. It's about 46,000 square feet. And West Bloomfield, we finished a feasibility study, which we do a lot of these studies for municipalities to look at what the feasibility is for building a rec center or community center, along with operational costs associated with that build. They are going out for actually they passed the bond in August, and they're looking to putting together a team to go to the next step, I guess, with this particular project. So just to give you some background on the Shepherd Park site, we looked at all the different encumbrances, things that need to stay, things that could go, things that would impact the site. So it was a month to a 2-month process that we went through to kind of look at what's existing and where potentially we could put a community center and maybe also utilize the existing parking that's on the site as well. So we started this discovery back in July and August of this year. We looked at, like I mentioned, the encumbrances on the site and documented those. We also visited the Farmington Hills Hawk and also the Van Buren Township Community Center. We looked at developing a program to see how big of a building we could put on this site, given the amount of dollars that you have from the bond series sale that will come up in this spring. We also looked at the parking that's necessary for a certain size building. Your ordinance requires 1 space per 250 square feet of building, so that's a very important factor to understand what the footprint will look like and how big of a parking area that we would need. And then we looked at the potential areas of development. We also looked at putting together a high-level program. We have a lot of historical information from all of the builds that we've done with community centers and rec centers. So we documented all the square footages associated with those spaces, what size gym, what size pool they have, what kind of, how big of a meeting space they would have. And we use that as a basis for building a program for your facility. This is another component which would be the pool component. A lot of them run, like for instance, the Farmington Hills Hawk was about 9,000 square feet. So they're quite large spaces, and also you have your support spaces with mechanical rooms and locker rooms and other things associated with the pool. So with that, as I mentioned, we put together an example program development for that, and then we also looked at the costs associated with these different program spaces. Keep in mind there are several buildings on the site that will have to be demolished in order to make room for a community center. So we've added that to the budget. The aquatics portion of the building will be at a higher cost per square foot. So we've indicated that, and we also looked at it as if the build was 2 years out, because you still have to design it, construct it, and then occupy. So the dollars are escalated from our historical information that we have from doing these rec centers and community centers. So we know, how much an aquatic center will cost, how much a community center program space would cost. So we put all that information together to provide a cost model for the development of the site. So this is your site. It's basically 57 acres. There are encumbrances, as I mentioned. Oakland County Parks owns probably half the site. There are other things that are bisecting the site, like the 12-inch water main, the 72-inch sanitary sewer. Granted, you can move those, but it's very costly. So those were, I guess, static given areas that we weren't going to touch, and kind of work our development around those encumbrances. There's the proposed hub. We've got the site detention area, the library, and the sliding hill and train that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. And then we looked at the existing parking. So the reason why we did this analysis is to understand what you currently have on site and what could be reutilized. So every dollar that you don't spend on putting in a parking lot can go towards the building. So it was crucial to kind of understand, that component of the site and seeing where potentially we could salvage some of the existing surface parking lot area and attribute it to the building. So we chunked this out into different acreages, and you can see that the largest chunk is probably the 6.83 acres, which is where the current pool and ice arena is located. To the south of that, we have the library site, And then to the left of that, we have 2 3-acre parcels where potentially a senior center component could go. To the north of that, we have a 4.25 acres. You can see that's where the courts are for the tennis courts, and that's just north of the sanitary sewer line. So the dashed lines are the utilities that bisect the site. And this is just an example of what potentially could go on that site as far as a community center. What we're finding is that you could probably support a community center that's between 55 to 60,000 square feet, given your budget. We also looked at the parking requirements for the community center. You need about 248 spaces. So we have 128 at the existing ice arena, so you'd have to add maybe another 100 parking spaces to support the community center. Also, we could fit a senior housing development on Oak Park Boulevard. As you can see, the L-shaped configuration. This is just showing a floor plate that of approximately 25 units that could fit on one floor plate. So as you stack, you could stack, you know, as you go up 25 units. So it's really up to, you know, a developer to refine that component of the senior housing development. But we know that we started off that, you know, typically these senior housing developments are about 3-acre sites. We could either place it where we have it now on this schematic, or we could move it to the left. But I kind of like this design because of the fact that the senior housing communicates well with the community center without traversing a parking lot or a driveway. We could put in a walking path that would go to the community center without any obstruction with vehicular traffic. This does show the existing community center building being removed and saving the library component and creating basically a ring road that would go to the community center and then exit out to Oak Park Boulevard. So as far as next steps, we would encourage hiring an owner's rep. That's why I'm here tonight, and I hope our expertise can help you out with this very important project. Everybody has day jobs, so it's, you know, right out in our wheelhouse as far as helping out communities like Van Buren, like Redford Township, like Waterford Township. They find that, you know, having this expertise at the table really helps out and makes the project go smoothly, keeps things on track with schedule and budget, and understanding all the nuances involved with developing a community center. Also, very important is establishing that that master project schedule. How long is it going to take to build? And as you go through the design, there's also intervals for approvals. And we encourage always to have the council involved with that and have their buy-off on getting to that next step from, let's say, design development to construction documents. Also establishing the master budget, which is very important as well. Granted that there is a dollar amount that you're selling bonds for, but we can also look at cash flow and when do you actually need all that money. We've done quite an extensive analysis on these community centers to understand when you have to pay the architect, how much you have to pay the architect and the CM, and all the costs associated with the build, technology designers, fitness equipment suppliers, all that kind of makes up the entire team for the project. And of course, issuing for an RFP for the architect engineer, very important. We do the solicitations, the RFPs, the contracts, so we work hand in hand with the city attorney to develop those contracts and make sure that everything is comports to what the project is all about, and hopefully minimize your risk on the project as well. And we would recommend a construction manager for this particular engagement, and we would issue the RFP as well. We've worked with all of the construction managers in the area. We do probably about, you know, $1.5 billion in work a year in this southeast Michigan area. So we know all the players, and they know us. So with that, I was just wondering if you have any questions.
City council members, do you have questions?
Madam Mayor, can I,
Yes.
I have some just leading questions I want to ask him, just because I think they might answer some questions.
good.
So Robert, so the first thing, I want to go back to the community center building program development slide. The recommend, because right now, you know, obviously, part of what we looked at, as you said, was the budget that we had allocated per the vote of the ballot initiative that our voters approved. But we did look at things based on a needs basis too, and obviously the pool was a huge part of that. So the aquatics area you have, council members, about 13,200 square feet of the total 55 to 60,000 square feet.
Correct.
Okay. And so this, if we didn't have that, would this most closely match, you know, Van Buren Township's community center, would you say?
Well, Van Buren's about 35,000 square feet.
Give or take,
So
yeah.
if you didn't have the aquatics component, it would be a lot less dollars allocated towards this initiative.
Okay. The other thing I was hoping you could detail a little bit more is the reason why the recommendation for the senior housing is where it is versus where the community center is.
Because of the ample parking that you would have that's existing. Also, that space is quite large to support a 55 to 60,000 square foot building. And also, it has a good communication to the woods that are right in the, behind it to the north.
And and the easement issues too with the.
Correct.
When we, council members, when we built this building we're sitting in now, one of the best or the biggest savings items that we had was this parking lot right out here. This was an existing parking lot that we didn't have to rebuild, and by virtue of that, saved us a ton of money. So we're trying very hard to do that same thing with this project. In addition to that, I was hoping you could speak a little bit about the retention basin over there.
Right, there's an existing retention basin that we could utilize if it could support the water runoff from the parking lot. So what we try to do is look at both areas where we can reduce cost on the building, or I'm sorry, the site work, so that we could put into the building. So you have a surface water detention basin right in that corner adjacent to the ice arena. And we're going to, you know, I would recommend going forward that you can look at that as a means of water drainage off your existing site, if it can support, you know, the volume of water from the runoff from the hard surfaces of the buildings and in the parking lots.
Which means we would save on sanitary sewer and
Right.
utilities. I have one more thing.
Mhm.
So I want to go to your last slide. So could you explain in more detail the important reason for the owner's rep and what that person does in this process? And so that is our next step, council members.
So what we do is we're kind of like the quarterback with your team. And we help you along the process of really, you know, refining that schedule, looking at the approvals. We put together a governance associated with the project. And what's helpful with that is it gives you, everybody on the team, an understanding of the approval process. If there's a change order, how does that get handled? If it's a certain dollar amount, how does that get handled? When are the approvals for the documentation that may occur for the project? So we get heavily involved with the upfront. There's a lot of planning in the front end of the project, procuring the architect, getting the right architect and team together for this project. Also the construction manager that has the capacity, the capability, the knowledge of doing this type of build. There's a lot of like nuances involved with these community centers that we're finding with you know, the equipment, the type of gymnasium that you build, you know, the size of these spaces, even down to the lighting. I mean, it's just, and the flooring for that matter. So it's a very extensive, I guess, nuanced project. And what we, you know, have found that with our historical information that we've gathered on all these rec center, we document everything that we do, and we even know operational costs. You know, how much does it cost for child watch if you're going to have that component? Or what are the hours of operations, which a lot of, you know, community centers, they start off like 40 hours a week, but typically these community centers, they'll be open for 100 hours a week. And how do you manage that? And how many folks do you have to bring on board in order to operate a building? We also are finding that operational costs are between $35 to $50 a square foot, depending on how, what the program spaces are. And out of that $35 to $50 a square foot, about $18 a square foot is attributed to staffing.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of folks, when they get into these projects and they haven't hired an owner's rep to, think through these things, they find that, well, we have to, maybe bond for an operational millage in order to take care of this, or we have to tap into general fund to offset our costs. So it's always good to just have a plan going forward and understanding what these potential costs might be, and you can, schedule and plan for that. Luckily, you've passed an operational millage, which will support this project, but it's always good to know what your costs are going into this endeavor.
So I lied, I have a couple more. So the other thing I think was, I think I'm getting this number right, but you expect with these that in general, about 30% of the cost could be offset with revenue from programs and things.
Right.
So we're never going to
yep.
get to 100% offset no matter what. We're going to get to about 30% or so.
Right.
Okay, so I think just one more thing I wanted to point out is it's a very important distinction for us because here in Oak Park, we're used to doing it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the building we're sitting in right now, we were the owner's rep, our staff was. And we didn't have that here. So we had a construction manager, didn't have an owner's rep. So in this situation, council members, my recommendation to you going forward is going to be that we have an owner's rep and that we do not do it in-house the way we did this. Also, I was hoping you just I promise this is the last one, but I think this is important.
Yeah.
The last one is the housing, the senior housing study.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could just briefly talk about what your next steps and recommendations would be for that.
So my coworker, Doug Smith, he has expertise in this area, and he's recommending that we go to market and find out what the developer interest would be for having a senior housing development on this site. They're going to tell you whether or not this is feasible, how many units they need to support their pro forma. I think it's a good area. There's a lot of good synergies between senior housing and the community center. It's, if you ever been to OPC in Rochester, they have a senior housing development close by, within walking distance. It's just a wonderful facility that they have over there. But I think all those different components need to be looked at, and what Doug is recommending is to go to market and get the interest of what the developers are willing to develop on that site. Yep.
City council questions. It's
I
kind of
do.
overwhelming.
I do have a question. So, we haven't really talked about what would be in the community center beyond a pool, right?
Right.
And a gymnasium, but in terms of courts, like, we're not into those weeds yet, right? We haven't really decided.
No, but we did put together a very high-level model just to figure out how big the building footprint could be based on what we typically see in community centers. For instance, a gymnasium. Usually they're about 9,000 to 10,000 square feet, and they have an upper-level mezzanine for a walking track, and that's another 5,000. So it's roughly about 15,000 for that gym component. And then there's also your multi-purpose rooms, your lobby, your administration, the support people. So we kind of have an understanding of, those components, but there's always these specialty spaces that you may want to have. For instance, when we were at Van Buren, they have a black box theater. That's about 3,500 square feet. But it's a great gathering spot for people, for theater productions. It's not a full-blown auditorium. It's very versatile. You can use it for, receptions and other activities within the building. So that might be something to consider, and that's something that Van Buren wanted as part of their program space.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, can I just, Councilmember Edgar, on page 10, on the Community Center Building Program Development slide, it does detail, high level, as Robert said, just some of the recommendations for some of those areas. I also, one more thing too, is it possible, because I know one of the things that I benefited from and I know the staff did as well, was the tours that you conducted with us in the Hawk and then Van Buren. Is it possible that council members could go on those same tours? And I think
Oh, yeah.
just because I think that would give them a much better understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could organize those.
Yeah, I'd love to do that if the council was open to doing that. Because once you see the spaces and understand the volume, how they're being used, for instance, the Hawk, I mean, they're trying to fill 244,000 square feet of space. And they have esports rooms, they have a wood shop, they have dance studios, archery within the building, a lot of athletic components like weights and, yoga class areas. They have a full-size gym, which was from the high school, and that was probably a 3-court gym, 15,000 square feet. I mean, it's substantial. They also have athletic fields, which is another component that you have to think about with this, is, what kind of athletic components outside of the building do you want? Do you want pickleball courts, some kind of, tennis, restroom areas, things that are outside the building? That's something that we're looking at Waterford Township, because they have 56 acres that they are looking to develop with outside, walking tracks. They want to put in something similar to the Hub with a auditorium, which is something that Redford Township is doing as well. So, I've reserved a little bit of money in that budget to take care of the outdoor site components. But the less money you spend on parking, development, and whatnot, and underground utilities, the more that you can put into the site development of that site.
Because I know the Caustic Center in Farmington Hills, they actually do pickleball inside, and it's hugely popular. Would we be able to fit some courts inside of this building?
Usually, the gymnasium's multi-purpose, and they use those gymnasiums for indoor pickleball, volleyball, and basketball, of course, and other activities. So, yes.
I went to high school at Harrison, which is now the Hawk, so yes, it looks a lot better.
We saw your locker when we were there, by the way.
Did you read all the scratches? I didn't realize that Oak Park High was going to renovate its pool,
Yes.
which may change things a bit for
Well, they're
us.
not renovating, they're infilling. So they're taking it out,
Oh,
Oh, removing it,
removing
yeah.
it.
removing.
Why are they removing it?
If you saw the mechanical room, it would probably cost more money to get that back online than it would to repurpose it.
That's the kind of expense we're looking at someday in the future, by putting a pool in.
I think you would be using this pool quite a bit, and it wouldn't get to that state.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, pools are hugely expensive to run.
They are.
Madam Mayor, can I just say one thing on always worrying about expenses, all of us?
All I see here is maintenance.
Yes, absolutely. But I do want to point out that on this slide,
Yeah.
now, Robert is using current, well, actually, I think he's building in inflation, which is right around 2.5%, 3% right now. But the total project budget right now is 43. And he's built in a cushion there, he's included demolition, the aquatics area, et cetera. So we're right where our voters authorized us to be. So I just want to point
Yeah.
that out.
So just to put it in perspective, our recent build at Caledonia, that's an aquatic center run by the YMCA that's under construction right now. Those the project cost on that came in at $720 a square foot for that facility. So aquatic centers are very expensive to build. The recent build, we had Redford. I think I brought some numbers here just in case. Redford was, project cost was $616 a square foot. If you escalate that out in 5 years, it's probably about $680, or 2 years actually, with 5% escalation. Caledonia would run about $800 a square foot, 2 years out. Van Buren, which was built just recently, that landed at about $500 a square foot. So there's quite a range, and it really depends on the program elements that you put into the building. Redford Township had a aquatics component, and that was about $1.5 to $2 million to build that therapy pool component that they had in their facility. Just a small area with a mechanical room and some support lockers.
And do we have, do we have money planned to run the pool, to pay the other 70% that doesn't come from fees, and
Well, and
to
it,
fix the pool and to fix the air filtration and all of that?
well, and this is something that's going to be, ongoing, especially, as we start seeing our new facilities, the event hub too. And it's going to be this slow buildup of operating costs. And we're going to have one of those on the agenda later tonight where, we're starting to add staff because we're starting to accommodate bigger facilities, more stuff going on. But again, the revenue brought in from the 2.403 mils, which, remember, our voters also authorized us to go after, was intended to help us cover some of these additional costs. Now, usage revenue is about 30%, so we're never going to get there with that. But what we don't get there with that, we can help to subsidize with the operating millage that we got approved. So we're prepared for it. We don't yet know exactly what that's going to look like. We do know that recreation as we know it today in Oak Park, Michigan, is not going to be recreation in 2.5, 3 years. It's going to be literally quadruple the programs and the size.
And yeah, I mean, I know the Hawk, they do charge residents still to use it, because you have to.
Right, they do. There's always memberships associated with these community centers. There's also non-resident membership dollars, which are higher than, of course, than the residents. They have family memberships, individual. There's a whole different tier structure for memberships at these community centers that we typically see.
Do you know anything about how it works for a city like Farmington Hills? If they've been able to offset some of the operating costs of their Hawk?
Yeah, they have a lot of partnerships with, community groups, also athletics. I believe Lorden's Tech uses their fields, other clubs use their fields, which helps with the revenue stream. There's also, you'll notice, like, for instance, at OPC in Rochester, Troy Community Center, they have a dedicated space for a healthcare provider. Like, you could have Henry Ford perhaps come in, and there's synergies involved with utilizing, that component with the athletic equipment and things within the building for physical therapy or whatever they have to offer. So if you're going to go that route, I would encourage you to start the talks early so that you can plan for the space, because of course there's a capital cost involved with building space out for that component.
Robert, is the healthcare facility also a possibility in the senior housing development?
I would say yes, but I would have to defer to Doug about that, if he can give you some examples of, where that's been provided. But I can't say for certain. I would defer to Doug.
How many people did you say just 25 people in the housing development?
25 per floor.
Say it again.
25 per floor, 25 units.
Per floor?
Right,
And how many
so-
floors?
Let's say usually you do a 3-stack, so 75 units perhaps. I think after 3 or 4, you need a different type of construction other than stick-built. So the cost per square foot varies as you go up in height for these
So did I
facilities.
hear you going 4 floors?
Yeah, well, you don't want, you have to be very mindful of your parking too, because that's going to limit you as far as the size of the building as well. I think it's 1 parking space per unit, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say it's 3 stories, you need 75 parking spaces for that development, according to your ordinance.
Unless we change them.
Man, just say,
Yeah.
but also, council members, it's important to remember, that's what this next phase in terms of the senior housing study will tell us. Because we're saying 3 floors, we don't know. yet.
Right.
We don't really know what the market will bear yet. We haven't got to that point yet.
Really talked about what the building would look like, whether it would be a nonprofit building, which would change things, right? I mean, you have to find a nonprofit or that builds these buildings, or would it be the same process? You still have to find a company that's willing to build it? Because we don't really know what the building's gonna look like at this point. I don't mean physically look like.
Right.
And again, just to respond to that, I just think that's very true. And I think that's why this next phase, as we do a much deeper dive into the possibility of that being a senior housing facility, what the market will bear, who, the relation, just taking, Plant Moran and their expertise in senior housing, they have relationships with developers who do senior housing, so they will know what the market will bear. Is there a market? How many floors we need? All of the additional amenities, whether it's a healthcare facility or not, all of those various things that we'll have to comply with. So that'll have to be done too.
And is this market rate housing or subsidized housing?
I think when we initially started talking about this, we looked at it, I think, trying to look for Kim back there, but I think it was more of an assisted living type facility as a.
Market rate independent.
Is it, I'm sorry, is it independent, not assisted living though?
No.
No.
It's independent living, market rate independent living, okay. I'm totally misspeaking here.
Have some subsidized in there too.
Explain, so the subsidized, come up to the mic, Kim. What is that subsidized? Explain that if you could.
It would be similar to our affordable housing projects where you allow some subsidies. They can do it based on
Holler
a
louder.
certain number of units.
Kim, louder.
I said it would work just like our affordable housing projects that we've done, where we would probably either grant a pilot or a portion of a pilot in order to have some of the units subsidized, but we wouldn't need to have them all subsidized, or it could be a neighborhood and enterprise zone. Again, we're nowhere near that point in time, so it would be more to come later on.
Thank you.
Holy cow.
Very exciting.
We had
Amazingly exciting, a little scary, but
we had initially planned on this being a work session, by the way, but I do think we'll follow up with a work session where we can dive much deeper into detail, so.
Yep.
And as City Manager Tungate mentioned that, it's beneficial to go and tour some of these community centers to see how they operate and, some of the amenities that they offer.
What would be the one closest to the size that we originally?
You're kind of in the middle of some of these centers. Usually they land around 35,000 square feet, and then they jump up to like 80 to 90,000 square feet. So like Troy, for instance, that's probably about 90,000. That has an aquatics component to it.
What's their budget? Ballpark.
That was built a long time ago, so it would be hard to, assess what that cost would be. And it was a conversion of an existing high school. So they kept the natatorium portion of it and built quite an extensive addition onto that facility. I would encourage going to OPC in Rochester to take a look at their program spaces. They have an auditorium, and I mentioned a work shop area, a billiards room, and a lot of different services that they offer seniors in that facility, along with like a day room for seniors so that caregivers can drop off their elderly parents so that they can take a break, and then it's something that's very well used there. They have a therapy pool. They have I think a 4 or 5 lane competition pool. But it's a really kind of a unique facility, and very much worth visiting. Redford Township just finished. That's one of our projects. I'm sorry, not Redford, Van Buren Township, and I would encourage maybe seeing that one just for the gymnasium component. Another one is Canton, which was built several years ago. That has an aquatics feature to it, but that one is probably 95,000 square feet. It's quite a large facility, but it does have a gym that's similar in size for that Redford Township and Van Buren Township built. So there's a lot of good, unique components, I would say, that are in the Canton Center that you probably would appreciate seeing.
Holy cow. Anything further? No? Ooh, we got a lot to digest here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, Reese,
Thank you.
for your competence and detail-oriented presentation. Thank you.